My canvas for this build will be this 45-gallon critter keeper. After hosing it down and leaving it to dry, I brought this to play. This cleaned out ham container is now going to become something very special for this build. It is the first time I attempt something like this, and what I'm doing now is surrounding the inside surface area with aquarium-safe acrylic. Now I use my fingers to spread it across the surface. I make sure to get the rims because I definitely want this to be concealed. Crushed up aquarium soil will adhere perfectly to this. I would prefer if the majority stayed at the bottom loose because I want to put aquatic plants in here, as well as propagating terrestrial plants like pothos. Before we add our substrate that our plants will grow in, we have to provide a drainage layer. If you've purchased plants from practically anywhere and noticed the bottom of the pot, chances are it will have its own drainage holes. The reason for this is so that the excess water that the soil is not able to absorb has a way to escape the system. This ensures that mold and root rot are kept at bay. Poking holes in our glass system is obviously not a good idea, so adding this irregular, voluminous media gives the water an aquaphor-like reservoir to escape to. Now we're going to use this window mesh that I cut out with the parameters of the tank. This is the same method I use in my terrariums in order to separate the substrate from the actual drainage layer. Now that that's settled, we can put in our substrate. The substrate itself is already alive with moss and isopods. We mix this substrate ourselves, and it's actually the same one that we use in all of our terrariums. It's basically like steroids for plants. Now let's add our proto pond. The addition of rocks ensures that it is drown-proof for our future inhabitants, as well as voluminous enough to support aquatic plants. I add substrate around all of the sides in order to conceal it, make it look like it's a level part of the tank. Now for the hardscape. I found this remarkable tree stump out in the woods. I chopped off any overhanging branches and left it out to dry for a bit. This is the first thing I include in the tank, as it will be the centerpiece. Every other aspect of the tank I add will revolve around this centerpiece. I've always found success in placing the biggest object first and then pivoting around that said object. Another sound piece of advice: don't obsess too much over your first draft of the hardscape. I guarantee you that your first draft will not be your last. The more variables you start to add, the more you'll want to change. The addition of plants, colors, shadows, contrasts, many things you probably won't even conceive until you're actually including it in the build, are all contributors to the flow of the tank, which is a very important thing to Azkaban and I alike. Azkaban very much wanted to get in on what I was doing, and while I both respect and relate to his curiosity, allowing him to take a closer look will only result in him consuming as much moss as he possibly could. So let's avoid that timeline altogether and not put him in there. With half the tank full of moss, I'm really liking how this is shaping out. The primary moss I'm featuring here is fern moss. This stuff is just way too cool. A patch of this is already interesting enough, let alone making it the carpeting flora in this biodiverse Eden. Now that we're covering the sides of the pond, it definitely starts looking a lot more natural. The addition of vertical sticks and air plants adds a lot of depth to the whole scape. I'm also not too picky about the placement of these, as I know they're bound to change as well with the introduction of plants. Other than the substrate and the major pieces of hardscape and the pond, things in here are bound to still be changing. This is what we've got so far. I think this looks fantastic, lots of layering. So now let's go ahead and add our photon connoisseurs, other than the moss and air plants, of course. We'll start off with some nerve plants. These photonias thrive in these high humidity environments, and I think they will be a fantastic pop of color, which is only going to be catalyzed by our very vibrant inhabitants. Golden pothos is probably one of my favorite plants. I recognize that this is a fast-growing plant and I will probably have to trim it, but that's no problem to me whatsoever. I actually enjoy the interactions more, and I can always use a golden pothos propagation or two. The same could be said for an array of plant species that I will be adding to this tank. Putting this at eye level, we get a good sense of what their POV is going to look like. Now, let's flood the pond. Salvina minima is the first aquatic plant that I add to this build. after introducing many more plants and our inhabitants, this is what the 45-gallon looks like today. An army of plants, including snake plants, velvet plants, Moon Valley friendship plants, bromeliads, phytonias, golden pothos, foxtail ferns, Mexican dwarf lilies, Spanish moss, and a whole army of other species. What about the inhabitants, you may ask? Where are they? They're in here, all right. You just have to take a much closer look. Dendrobates tinctorius, of the Azurius locality. These living gemstones are better known as poison dart frogs. These are juveniles and still have a little bit of growing to do. The vast rainforest provided for them gives them many opportunities to call any nook or cranny their home. In the wilds, their diet primarily consists of venomous insects. They are then able to harness the accumulative venom of these insects and weaponize it themselves. Mere contact with this blue amphibian will result in paralysis or even death. Indigenous tribes that shared the forests with these frogs capitalized on their poison. They would purposely rub arrow tips and dart tips on the frogs' backs in order to harness the poison themselves. Hence the name of this beautiful creature, the poison arrow/dart frog. The frogs themselves, however, are immune to their own poison, of course, likely due to mutations in their sodium transport chains, which is the area that the toxins primarily target. Recollecting my train of thought going back to the build, I can't tell you how happy I am with the way everything turned out. To be completely honest, I've never done something even remotely to this scale with this level of detail, especially with elements like the pond, which to my surprise is one of the most frequented spots of the vivarium. In my opinion, it's because the flightless fruit flies love to gather around this area since it's the most humid. This is all I've got for you today. I really hope that you enjoyed this very long and extensive video. It's the first of many to come out on this channel. I really do appreciate each and every one of you that stuck around to the end. Please subscribe for more awesome content. Later. It's just too cool, man. No way, he's going in the pond. No way. Is he actually gonna use it? No way, dude. No, let's go. Let's go. All the elements being used. Full circle. Let's go.